Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Social Sciences, SOSS, Master of Arts, Public Administration, MPA, English, First Year, MPA 011 State, Society and Public Administration, Unit 1 Nature of State.
1.0 Learning Outcome. After reading this unit, you will be able to times understand the concept and the nature of the state, times discuss the different perspectives on the state, times analyze the changing viewpoints on bringing the state back in debate, and times examine the role of the state in the globalization context. 1.1 Introduction. State is a complex concept connoting wide range of parameters that attempt to define it. But, somehow, there is no consensus on any definition of the state. The theorists have not been unanimous about the state's nature, structure, functions, and behavior. Though the term state found an inclusion in the political vocabulary around as late as the 16th century, there have been oblique references to the very idea of state all through the evolution of human civilization. Be it codified laws, shared norms, kinship, chiefdom, political system, sovereign authority, or divine monarch, these terms have hinted at some or the other form of governance, which came to be gradually defined as the state. The definition of the state has premised itself on divine, ethical, and legal notions in the course of its evolution. Many scholars feel that it is impossible to theorize any phenomenon, such as family, culture, law, religion, and ecology without a reference to the state. The state impacts on the lives of individuals in a way no other institution can do. This unit will examine the concept of the state and different perspectives from which to analyze the state as an evolving phenomenon. It will highlight the contemporary, neoliberal perspective of the state against the backdrop of globalization besides touching upon the liberal, Marxist, and other pertinent viewpoints. As this is the first unit of this course, it will try to build a theoretical background for the subsequent units where the discussions will center around the relationship of the state with public administration, market, civil society, and other non-state actors as well as the allied issues and challenges. 1.2 Defining the state has been considered as a problematic institution. The theorists are unable to decide when states first arose or what states actually are. The trajectory of the state involves a long and checkered journey from tribal communities, city states of Greece and Rome, feudal societies, absolutist sovereign states, to fascist states, communist states, and welfare states. Some define the state in terms of morality, while others see it as an instrument of exploitation. Some regard it simply as an aspect of society, still others as a synonym for government. The state has even been viewed as a unique and separate association, which stands apart from social institutions. There are also metaphysical and quasi-religious interpretations of the state. Some point toward the legitimacy of the state, while some to the character of power it enjoys. Yet, we must define the state in order to grapple with its so-called problematic. If politics is all about who gets what, when and how, then the state becomes the executive agency for the same. In simplistic terms, the state could be defined in terms of its most basic features of territoriality, population, government, and sovereignty. For a better comprehension, all these elements need to be analyzed in the present context of globalization. We will discuss these later in this section. The state may be defined as a system of relationship which defines the territory and membership of a community, regulates its internal affairs, conducts relations with other states, and provides it with identity and cohesion. It consists of institutions and processes which are extremely various and complex, presiding over different spheres of the community, which distribute different social goods according to different principles. Jordan, 1985. On the other hand, states may also be viewed more macroscopically as configuration of organizations and actions that influence the meaning and methods of policies for all groups and classes in society. The state, too, the status is prescient, omnipotent, and even arbitrary, as in this perspective, the society is seen as non resistant, inactive, and submissive. See Chandoke, 1995. Among the many questions which provoke debate on the state, Avers Bob Jessop, 1990, are: is the state itself best defined by its legal form, its coercive capacities, its institutional composition and boundaries, its internal operations and modes of calculation, its declared aims, its functions for the broader society of its sovereign place in the international system? Is it a thing, a subject, a social relation, or simply a construct which helps to orientate political action? Is statelessness a variable, and if no, what are its central dimensions? What is the relationship between state and civil society, the public and private? State power and micropower relations? Can the state be studied on its own? Should it be studied as part of the political system, or can it only be understood, and if so, what are its sources and limits? Jessop feels that any general definition of the state would need to refer to the state discourse as well as state institution. Not all forms of macropolitical organizations can be termed as state, like nor can the state simply be equated with governments, law, bureaucracy, a coercive apparatus, or another political institution. The state indeed is a contentious concept in political theory, observes Nira Chandoke, op.cit, as any inquiry into the state is value-laden. Political theorists have been preoccupied with conceptualizing a state which could be capable of realizing conditions favorable to human nature, but no definition ever has been able to capture the state in its entirety. It is extremely difficult to define the state. David Easton has spoken about the futility of conceptualization of the state, as in his view, it just leads to needless debates and a kind of conceptual morass. In fact, Easton has claimed that scientific political theory requires clarity and therefore it is better to abstain from using the term state altogether. In 1981, however, he did change his stance and commented that many of our thoughts that had been polished off a quarter of century ago have now risen from the grave to haunt us once again, cited from C.F. Hoffman, 1995. Nikos Polinsas has described the state as an indecipherable mystery. John Hoffman, Ibid, maintains that although Polinsas argues that the state seeks to maintain the cohesion of a class-divided society, he does not tell us what the state actually is. The definition of the state as institutionalized political power is circular, since what is political is never identified independently of the state. Polinsas refers to the state as a material condensation of a relationship between classes, but insists that it is not reducible to these relationships. Nietzsche has described the state as the coldest of all cold monsters. The institution, which tells lies in all the languages of good and evil, C.F. Hoffman, Ibid. In the words of John Urey, 1981, the state could be classified as a parasite serving the interests of the influential. It could be described as a mystification, for only apparently representing general interests of economic base responding to and developing forces of production. The state is an ideal collective capitalist standing alongside capital and sustaining its pattern of accumulation. Some scholars like Nozick go on to contest the very need of the state. Nozick says that the fundamental question of political philosophy, one that precedes questions about how the state should be organized, is whether there should be any state at all. Why not have anarchy? It has been observed that since the anarchist theory, if tenable, undercuts the whole subject of political philosophy, it is appropriate to begin political philosophy with an examination of its major theoretical alternative, according to Nozick. In an anarchy, pressed by spontaneous groupings, mutual protection associations, division of labor, market pressures, economies of scale, and rational self interest, there arises something very much resembling a minimal state. Carlson, 2002. We will read more on Nozick's views in Unit 5 of this course. In the words of Christopher W. Morris, 1998, emphasis added, the state is characterized in terms of a number of interrelated features, namely, time's continuity in space and time. The state is a set of political organizations whose institutions endure over time, time's transcendence. The state's institutions do not constitute it, they are its agents, time's political organization. These are institutions through which the state acts, time's authority. The sovereign is the ultimate source of political authority in its territory. Time's allegiance, citizens owe allegiance to the state and the state has a strong loyalty towards them. Primarily, as we mentioned earlier, the state can be understood through an analysis of its basic features of territory, population, sovereignty, and government. This means that a state exists in a geographically identifiable territory within which there exists a population, many of whom could be classed as citizens. The modern state overawes all other powers within a given territory through its institutions of bureaucracy, judiciary, and military. Within the given territory, the state claims hegemony over all other groups and associations through its sovereign government. The state, thus, could be defined in terms of its monopoly of control over means of violence, territoriality, and sovereignty, constitutionality, impersonal power, public bureaucracy, authority, legitimacy, and citizenship. Pearson, 1996. A detailed discussion on territoriality and sovereignty as major features of the state in the backdrop of globalization will form a part of Unit 3 of this course. David Held et al., 1983, opined that in modern Western political thought, the idea of the state is often linked to the notion of an impersonal and privileged legal or constitutional order with the capability of administering and controlling a given territory. This notion found its earliest expression in ancient Rome, but it did not become a major object of concern until the early development of European state system from 16th century onwards. We will be reading more on the evolution of the state again in Unit 3. Max Weber, who is generally known for his ideal construction of bureaucracy, actually gave a systematic theory of state too. He attributed specific characteristics, such as territoriality, violence, and legitimacy, to describe states. For him, bureaucratic form of organization was the defining element of modern state. He tried to create an ideal type of state that was essentially a bureaucratic state. In fact, his analyses give an insight into the relationship between the state and administration. Weber's analysis, as has been observed, assumes the existence of a strong, autonomous, and formally rational state whose form varies from nation to nation. The functions of this state would be performed through an accountable bureaucracy. But the reality of democratic control of bureaucracies is always problematic. For whole societies, only the market can provide an adequate mechanism for their rational coordination. However, both bureaucracy and markets merely express the power structure of society, a structure with no moral justification but one which formal rationality clothes with legitimacy. Lowe, 1991. David Held, 1989, points out that Max Weber drew extensively from Marxist writings, albeit critically. Weber believed that it was simply misleading to conflate problems concerning the nature of administration in itself with problems concerning the control of the state apparatus. The modern state, unlike its predecessors, has a Capability of monopolizing the legitimate use of violence within a given territory. The state maintains compliance within a given territory. Its web of agencies and institutions find their ultimate sanction in the claim to the monopoly of coercion. This coercion is legitimized by a belief in the justifiability or legality of this monopoly. Political order, David held, Ibid, observes, is not achieved through common value, systems or general respect for authority of the state or legitimacy or by complex web of interdependencies between political, economic, and social institutions and activities which divide power centers and which create multiple pressures to comply. The specificity of the state lies in the fact that the state, by codifying the dominant power relations in society, gives to these power relations fixity and thereby to society its stability. As a set of specific political branches, the state bestows legitimacy upon a set of hegemonic social relations because it recognizes them and codifies them through legal acts. The state possesses the capacity to select, categorize, crystallize, and arrange power in the formal codes and institutions. Both Klausov and Jurgen Habermas analyze state in terms of legitimation. Writers, like Habermas, have held the view that in the conflict between the true nature of the state and the ideology, the state as the caretaker of society would sooner or later create a crisis of legitimacy of the state itself. As per Jurgen Habermas, increased state activity in economic and other social relations is one of the major characteristics of contemporary capitalism. In the interests of avoiding economic crisis, government and the state shoulder an increasing share of the costs of production. But the state's decisions are not based merely on economic considerations. Thus, the capitalist state must act to support the accumulation process and at the same time act, if it is to protect its image, as fair and just to conceal what it is doing. If mass loyalty, compliance to laws, rules, etc., is threatened, tendency towards a legitimation crisis is established. Cf. Held, et al., op.cit. The legitimacy of the government depends on how they exercise the power of the state and what ends do they promote. The question of legitimacy is connected with the nature of soft states. See Gunnar Myrdal, Asian Drama, an inquiry into poverty of nations, 1968, that are unwilling to coerce people in order to implement declared policy goals such as collecting taxes, punishing evaders, etc., and also the hard states, which coerce the people to comply with the policy directives, example, military dictatorship. In reality, every state is a mix of the two extremes. The state's claim to monopolize legitimate force, as has been observed, is one with its claim to the sweeping authority, and such a claim is not credible. It is a claim that no force may justifiably be employed by someone if it is not accepted or authorized by the state. Morris, 1998. However, specific ends and rules regulate the monopoly of force. The idea of legitimacy is important with regard to the government as the state seeks its own legitimation in terms of common interests of a community. The modern state, as per Paulinsas, engages more in ideological and symbolic legitimation. For instance, flag hosting on Independence Day, Republic Day parade in countries like India are exercises in symbolism. Another feature that is linked with the concept of the state is sovereignty, both internal as well as external. Many feel that different types of state can be differentiated according to the locus of sovereignty, be it monarchy, aristocracy, or democracy. Sovereignty is that power which is used to remove conflict. It is the defining characteristic of the state. See David Held, 1989, op.cit. Sovereignty for Rousseau is inalienable and indivisible but is vested in the body politic. He differentiated the sovereignty of people from that of governments. Sovereignty is held in abeyance when the government is in power, with legislature being supreme. In fact, early liberals such as Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau have extensively written on the nature of the sovereign that is bound and the nature of sovereignty that could be unlimited. In order to further comprehend the sovereign nature of the state, we will discuss their views in some detail later in our next section. From the 16th century, states in Europe came to take for granted that their survival depended on absolute control over a bounded territorial space. Sovereignty was imagined as the unifying soul inscribed on the landscape and population within the state's territory, which was protected and extended by a centralized military and economy under the control of the absolutist sovereign, whether crown or parliament. Opello and Rosso, 1999. Unit 3 will deal with the nature of feudal and absolutist states in detail. As the modern state came to be more highly developed, the problematic of instituting sovereignty shifted. Sovereignty came to be seen as residing in the population of a territory and not in the ruler. This popular sovereignty positioned the sovereign as protector of a separate private sphere consisting of the market economy and sphere of private conscience. In terms of popular sovereignty, the state was conceived as a creation of pre-existent people, either as its useful property or as its expression. Several writers like Jean Bodin in the 16th century and Thomas Hobbes in the 17th century have argued that the sovereignty of the state had no limit in principle and no need for justification outside itself. The state was not confined to administering traditional laws but could create new laws. Hobbes sets clear limits to the operation of the principle of sovereignty, stating that there are many areas with which the state should not be concerned. This question of the limits of the new sovereign power was taken up by Locke, Montesquieu, and Kant. What was emphasized was that the state was only one association amongst many to which individuals belong in a civil society, and that it did not have an exclusive claim over them. Gradually, certain things like freedom and happiness became indispensable to individual autonomy, and governments were withheld from infringing them. Gamble, 1981. Sovereign statehood thus depends on territoriality, fixed locations, and supreme authority over land and space. But the pivotal role of the state in globalizing capitalism has at the same time threatened this very characteristic of sovereignty. If we look at the developments in the post-1970 period, it becomes clear that the traditional meaning of sovereignty vis-à-vis territoriality has undergone a change since the 1970 as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization, WTO, have enforced more authoritative measures on the monetary and fiscal policies of less developed member countries. The Structural Adjustment Program has forced these countries into reforms and deepened their dependency on globalizing corporations. Farjamand, 2002. David Held et al., op.cit, observed that it is more cogent to view political communities sociologically as overlapping networks of interaction rather than geographically as bounded territorial totalities. The difficulties of coming to a judgment about the modern state are compounded when one examines it in relation to the system of nation-state and the interconnections of the world economy. It has been pointed out that the notion of nation-state that emerged with the struggle against feudal and despotic monarchies is fast disappearing. The process of globalization has brought with it new issues and challenges for the notion of sovereignty. Globalization is an ideology coming from the center of the system that asserts, there is today an international community that is independent of nation-states, and 2, the nation-states have lost the autonomy to define their national policies, having no alternative but to follow the rules and constraints imposed naturally by global markets. Bresapara and Carlos, 2003. Unit 3 of this course will further discuss this aspect. some scholars believe that there is a real crisis of nation-state. Sudipta Kaviraj, 1995, in the context of India, observes that there could be a crisis of nation-state. The central contradiction of the history of Indian national state seems to be between the logic of economic development and logic of political identities. Economic change, through centralizing state and the homogenizing market, powerful bureaucracy, massive managerial and professional middle class understands the advantages of large entities like the commodities and labor market. But the very processes produce exclusion, resentment and hostility in those who cannot partake the benefits of these processes. It marks a crisis in the life of the Indian nation-state. But, as pointed out by John Donne, 1995, all power is relational. If there is any crisis of nation-state, then it stems from various threats to human security rather than anything else. The assumption that the emergence of global civil society and increasing levels of interstate interactions have eroded sovereignty is not quite correct. Closer, international cooperation among states is in itself an exercise of state sovereignty. Concerted action does not necessarily weaken states, rather it can strengthen them by creating more stable international interactions. Moreover, globalization without effective and robust multilateralism is bound to lead to crisis because markets are neither inherently stable nor equitable. Thus, nation-states clearly drive the entire framework for global interaction. In brief, globalization does not reduce the role of the nation-state but redefines its functions. Bertucci and Alberti, 2003. In fact, globalization makes nation-states more strategic. A purely market or a fully state-coordinated economy has never existed in history. Brescia and Carlos, op.cit. The growth of the state, points out Nils Carlson, op.cit, is one of the most remarkable features of the 20th century. In all Western democracies, the state has become bigger and bigger, both in relative and absolute terms. Typically, these modern states, the so-called welfare states, are characterized by various types of distributional systems, regulations, and high levels of public expenditure. In some of these countries, public sector expenditure amounts to over half of the gross national product, and taxes sometimes take over half of the incomes generated in the society. Even some of the individual's most private spheres have become penetrated by the state. These societies have become more and more politicized. We have to thus examine the nature of state in the present globalization context. In the parlance of public administration, the executive arm of the state would mean the organizations constituting the system of governmental institutions. Over here, public administration is conceived as the key output linkage of the state towards civil society. Pierre, 1995. The different perspectives to the study of the state could form the basis for analyzing the state. The deluge of viewpoints on the state is, however, unable to capture the vast canvas of its nature and scope. The empirical evidence on the working of state apparatus nevertheless defies the influence of any single predominant perspective. Let us now discuss some of these viewpoints. 1.3 Changing perspectives on the nature of state. The idea of modern state, sovereign internally and externally, with supreme jurisdiction over its territorial space, was the subject matter of normative political theory till it was eclipsed by the rise of behavioralism. C. Mukherjee and Ramaswamy, 1999. As per Nira Chandoke, op.cit, the aspirations of behavioralist political scientists held sway all through the early 19th century. They believed that politics should comply with the norms of an objective, value-free and accurate science. This resulted in the exclusion of all those concepts which could not be accommodated. The major casualty was the concept of state. The social upheavals and the political unrest in the late 1960s in many capitalist countries, the disenchantment with the nationalist project in the Third World, dismay over the political excesses of the post-colonial era and the denunciation of the excesses of Stalinism brought the state back into political theory. Around the late 1960s, political theory resurrected the concept of the state and endowed it with a theoretical prominence and an empirical identity that it had not enjoyed since the early decades of the century. The study of the state has been looked at from various perspectives that gauge it in terms of parameters of individualism, egalitarianism, and universalism. In fact, the plethora of viewpoints to study the state conflates its defining features even further. Each perspective describes the state differently. So much so that convergence points are difficult to determine and a holistic picture of the contemporary state remains blurred. The three perspectives that have prominently defined the nature of state are liberal, Marxist, and neoliberal. Units 4 and 5 of this course discuss them in detail. Over here, we will simply gloss over the varied viewpoints. 1.3.1 Liberal perspective. Different thinkers have described the evolution of state in their political theory through the lens of liberal perspective. Their perspectives have been based on their analysis of the state of nature that has depicted human beings in a different light, compelling them to look for a surveillance system in the form of an individual or group of individuals in order to protect their life, property, and self-interest. All evolutionary theories of the state show that individuals have surrendered their privileges and powers in order to create a state-like institution for their defense, protection of property, and promotion of liberty, as well as for a smooth provision of goods and services. Liberalism developed as a distinctive form of ideology that accepted the state only in so far as it could be justified by a rational discourse appealing to universal standards of human nature and justice. Liberal thought supported the rule of law as it would protect citizens best from arbitrary rule and leave individuals free to pursue their own private lives and accumulate wealth and property. The early liberals, John Locke, Montesquieu, David Hume, Adam Smith, James Mill, and Jeremy Bentham accepted democracy because it was the best way to protect individual liberty from growing power of the state. Liberals first believed that the right to vote and to hold office would be restricted to those individuals who owned a certain amount of property. But 19th century liberals such as John Stuart Mill and Alexis de Tocqueville expanded the definitions of equality, freedom, and democracy. Opello and Rousseau, op.cit. The new classical liberals such as Wilfredo Pareto, Max Weber, Émile Durkheim, Ludwig von Mises, and F.A. Hayek also advocated a drastic reduction in the role of the state to that of maintaining a free market in goods and labor. However, these thinkers, for instance, Pareto divested the market mechanisms of most of the moral advantages that the earlier liberals had talked about. The utility of the market lay in its being a less corruptible and more neutral mechanism than democracy for revealing individual preferences and achieving the optimal degree of satisfaction. Bellamy. 1993. The Austrian school, von Mises and Hayek, insisted on the analytical priority of macroeconomic theory and denied its validity, questioning all governmental attempts to interfere in the economy. Max Weber's perspective on the state, about which we have read earlier on in this unit, was in consonance with the Austrian school. The liberals, towards the end of 20th century, tried to combine the liberal values of liberty and equality with a concern for social justice, keeping in view the requirements of efficiency. John Rawls and Robert Nozick wrote on these lines. It is from this premise that the neoliberal or the new right philosophy takes over, ibid, emphasis added. Talking of the early liberals, it can be seen that thinkers like Thomas Hobbes were the first to comprehend the nature of public power as a permanent, sovereign, rightful, and authorized representative to exercise powers. Hobbes saw human relationships as those of mutual suspicion and hostility and attributed this predicament to human nature. As a result, the individuals surrendered all their powers through a contract to a third party who was not a component of the contract, but nevertheless received all the powers that were surrendered. It created a monist state and a government at the same time. John Locke's state of nature was a state of perfect freedom and equality. But since he did not rule out the possibility of disputes among individuals, a rational and limited agreement which assured obedience for the preservation and enhancement of life, liberty, and property was envisaged. In fact, it was the social character of property that enabled Locke to defend a minimal state with limited government and individual rights. See Mukherjee and Ramaswamy, op.cit. And David Held et al., op.cit. The state of nature in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's writings comprised individuals guided by instincts of self-preservation and compassion. For Rousseau, vanity among human beings and difference in property and possessions led to conditions of inequality. Civil society degenerated into a state of war and a social contract ensued. He propagated participatory democracy instead of representative parliamentary government. Rousseau's conception of self-government has been among the most provocative, challenging at its core some of the critical assumptions of liberal democracy, especially the notion that democracy is the name for a particular kind of state, which can only be held accountable to citizens once in a while. See Held et al. op.cit. Jeremy Bentham believed in greatest happiness for greatest number of people. He regarded the notion of modern state as an ideal. State was a legal entity with individualism as its ethical basis. He stipulated happiness and not liberty as the end of the state and called for institutions that would support the legal system, namely, bureaucratization of public service and legalization as a continual process, accommodating change and diversity. In fact, utilitarianism is one of the most influential schools of modern liberalism. Mukherjee and Ramaswamy, op.cit. It will be appropriate to mention Hegel's views on state over here. For him, the state represented universal altruism. State was an ethical entity with no element of coercion and fear. He perceived the state as an end in itself. He did not distinguish between private and public spheres. Bureaucracy was the most important component of the Hegelian state. Hegel actually modernized the idea of the organic state to fit the atomized market society that had developed in the beginning of the 19th century. In the words of Hegel, extreme poverty was an inevitable concomitant of a system of production based on private property. Such a highly atomized and conflictual society could not be expected to hold together without a strong and institutionalized expression of structures that could carry out the functions of government. The state was thus woven into civil society. Cf. Law, op.cit. Adam Smith, a staunch liberal, is often cited as the authority for advocating laissez-faire and state minimalism. He thought of the state as performing pertinent functions of defense, protection from injustice, and erection of public works and institutions, but beyond that, the state had to be confined and restrained. Liberal thought sustains itself on this premise. Even though the liberals started off with laissez-faire, they moved on towards restrained state intervention over time. It was John Stuart Mill who deviated from the classical economic theory of laissez-faire and advocated optional areas of state interference. He visualized the state as a moral institution concerned with promotion of virtue and excellence in an individual citizen. Émile Durkheim maintained that the satisfaction of the need to be associated with others demanded some form of corporative association, a kind of moral order that could subordinate individual interest to a wider general interest. He looked forward to the re-emergence of the corporations in modern society as non-territorial, occupationally bounded institutions extracting discipline from their members, as liberal perspective will be discussed in detail in Unit 4 of this course. Let us briefly highlight the different strands in liberal thought in this section. Modern pluralism that advocates that intermediate institutions such as churches, universities, and professional or economic organizations ought not to be regarded as dependent organizations upon the will of a sovereign authority, but should enjoy a degree of rightful autonomy. It is an important strand in liberal thought. Pluralism has been a profound liberal democratic reaction against the greatness of the state and absoluteness of sovereignty. It believes the state to be only an association of society, like many other associations. The pluralist theory assumes that functional tasks are divided among a variety of specialized agencies, each of which attends to its own specific goal and adapts its behavior to environmental changes or the policies of other organizations, public or private, which affect the efficient performance of its duties. Self, 1985. Corporatism, as Peter Self, Ibid, puts it, is even more slippery concept than pluralism. As another important strand in liberalism, it lays stress on the social nature and the need for a systematic social order, rather than opportunities for competitive pursuit of individual freedom and happiness. Corporate states have sought to limit the number of representative organizations and granted those they officially recognized a kind of monopoly where policies are decided within representative organizations. Corporatism can also be defined as a distinctive combination of political representation and state intervention. Jessop, op.cit. Corporatism shares with socialism a view of competition as wasteful. Corporatism chains all private firms to the discipline of a national plan. The neo-corporatist theory is more in tune with capitalist societies. Neo-corporatist theory recognizes the significance of the cleavage between capital labor and the groups that form around this cleavage. While the pluralist theory tends to regard the state as neutral with respect to interest mediated, the neo-corporatists suggest that there is more to the state's neutrality. The structural rules within which bargaining takes place exclude marginal groups and issues. The central theme of neo-corporatist theory is the intermediation between core interests in civil society and those of the state. Low, op.cit. 1.3.2 Marxist perspective, in the view of the Marxist theory, about which we will read more in Unit 4 later. Paul Streetin, op.cit, points out that the government is the executive committee of the ruling class and always serves the economic interest of that class. The state acts in the interest of a ruling class. It is the function of the state to reconcile the differences of interest within the ruling class so as to maintain its power and capitalist mode of production. David Held, et al., op.cit, maintain that Marxists conceive of the state as an extension of civil society reinforcing the social order for the enhancement of particular interest in capitalist society. The democracy can only be established with the destruction of social class and ultimately the abolition of state itself. Marx originally treated the modern state as a parasite institution that played no essential role in the economy. The state and state power was discussed as epiphenomena of the system of property relations and the resulting economic class struggles. State, in the Marxist perspective, has been treated as a set of institutions, and no general assumptions are made about its class character. Jessop, op.cit. There are two strands in Marx's account of the relation between classes and the state. David Held, 1989, op.cit, observes that the first strand stresses the fact that the state, generally, and bureaucratic institutions in particular, may take a variety of forms and constitute a source of power which need not be directly linked to the interests or be under the unambiguous control of the dominant class. By this account, the state retains a degree of power independent of the class, its institutional forms and operational dynamics cannot be inferred directly from the configuration of class forces, they are relatively autonomous. This position has been propagated by Marxists such as Nikos Poulinsas, Klaus and Theda Skocpol. The second position in Marx, observes David Held, is the predominant position in his writings, which is that the state and its bureaucracy are class instruments that emerged to coordinate a divided society in the interest of the ruling class. Marx could never reconcile these two positions. Ralph Miliband later argued that in order to be politically effective, the state must be able to separate itself routinely from the ruling class factions. He wanted to assist the class and the state on the one hand and the state and the society on the other. Nikos Poulinsas rejected Miliband's approach, which he considered as subjectivist. He argued that state is the unifying element in capitalism. It should function to ensure political organization of dominant classes as well as political disorganization of worker classes, which can threaten the hegemony of bourgeoisie. But even Poulinsas neglects the relationship among elites, government officials and parliamentarians in his study of state, which is taken up by Klausov and Habermas in their writings. Poulinsas says the state is a social relation. This approach puts the form of the state at the heart of any analysis of political representation and/or state intervention, insofar as the complex form of the state as institutional ensemble shapes and conditions the whole political process. It also directs attention to the diverse, structural and conjectural factors that determine their relative weight on the state. Poulinsas's views have met with sharp criticism by Jurgen Habermas and Klaus Hoff. They observe that both Poulinsas and Miliband regard capitalist states from a negative perspective, as the state is treated only from the point of view of how far it stabilizes capitalist economic enterprise or prevents the development of potentially revolutionary influences. The role of institutions has been neglected. As per Klaus Hoff, most significant feature of the state is the way it is enmeshed in the contradictions of capitalism. The state, on the one hand, must sustain the process of accumulation and on the other impartially arbitrate class interests, thereby legitimating its power. In recent times, the Marxist writings have seen a revival of anti-dependency Marxism. As per the Marxists such as Bill Warren, predatory state acts in its own interest and that of the powerful pressure groups. There is no place for disinterested, benign, altruistic government policies in state-led economies. Cf. Paul Streetin, op.cit. Warren observes that contrary to Marxist views, the prospects of successful capitalist development in many underdeveloped countries are quite favorable. He stresses that state itself is not a monolithic block, it is an arena of conflict and schism. He holds that peripheral capitalism is a progressive, revolutionary force, making for productivity, growth and economic progress. He believes that obstacles to capitalist development can be traced to internal contradictions of the Third World rather than the relationship between imperialism and Third World. Cf. Bhattacharya, 1999. 1.3.3 Neoliberal perspective. Another prominent perspective of the state, i.e., the new right or neoliberal perspective, is a strong advocate of the retreat of the state. It is a pro-market, minimal state perspective that builds on the public choice approach, which in turn bases itself on principal agent theory and transaction cost analysis. In the view of Paul Streetin, op.cit, the public choice perspective of the state holds that states can do no right, they use the authority of government to distort economic transactions for their benefit. According to public choice theorists, all distortions are due to government interventions. State is an optimizing agency, but it optimizes the interests of special groups. The normative idea of public choice theorists, as has been pointed out, revolve around three positions: I. New right conservation based on inability of government to make men better or more equal; 2. Goal of maximization that entails problems of agenda setting and political manipulation; and 3. Liberal individualism that supports competitive market and private property as essential elements in individual freedom of choice. Spalber, 1997. Public choice theorists have recommended minimizing the role of the state, setting limit to the discretionary power of politicians, reducing public monopolies, and curtailing the functions of government agencies. We will read about public choice perspective in detail in Unit 19 of our next course, 012, on administrative theory. Drawing from the public choice analysts, neoliberalism presents the late modern condition as a deterritorialized world as a national system of absolute free trade in which state boundaries do not act as barriers to the flow of goods and services around the globe. The ideology of neoliberalism, in which liberalism is reduced to market economies, suggests that states are simply passive vehicles in globalizing world economy, whose momentum they are powerless to stop and control. The best states can do is get out the way. Opello and Rousseau, op.cit. The neoliberal perspective could be considered the most prominent one in the contemporary scenario of globalization. We will read more about the role of the state in the backdrop of globalization in Units 3 and 5 later in this course. The most conspicuous impact of this perspective could be seen on public administration in the form of revival of managerialism. The new reform model in public administration of 1980s and 1990 as the new public management (NPM) model has condemned the traditional public administration as a failure. Public administration today observes. Mohit Bhattacharya, 1999, op.cit, is oscillating between the pressures exerted by globalization and liberalization on the one hand and demands to transform itself into a humanistic, eco-friendly and egalitarian administration on the other. The changing nature of the state has also impacted on the complexion of public administration. Mohit Bhattacharya, 2003, draws attention to 5 components of the new paradigm of public administration in the globalization context. These are: I. High quality services that citizens value; 2. High quality standards of services; 3. Rigorous performance management; 4. Managerial support services; and V. Receptiveness to competition. The 2 units 14 and 17 in this course will discuss this aspect at length. It is very difficult to look at the state from a single vantage viewpoint or perspective. The perspective of the discourse theory, propagated by Cynthia M.C. Swain, Orion White, Charles Fox and Hugh Miller, adds an entirely different dimension to the study of the state. They believe that administrative legitimacy is the product of understanding created by participants in public discourse. Themes among discourse theorists include anti-fundamental resistance to meta-narratives, a constructivist view of knowledge, and the search for free and uncovered communication. Box, 2002. The new sovereign is not the legislature but the citizens themselves. Alternatives to the representative democratic accountability feedback loop model in the form of constitutionalism or neo-institutionalism and communitarism or civism are being sought. Fox and Miller, 1995. These postmodernists pose a different problem for a critique of the state since they appear to reject the very idea of critique itself. Postmodernists frequently embrace a relativist position, says Hoffman, op.cit, which equates all discourses as equally arbitrary and identifies logic itself as logocentric in character. Down with rationality, long-life nihilism, but a nihilist stance not only makes a serious critique of the state impossible, it also contradicts postmodernists' support for pluralism and self-activity. Bob Jessop, OP.CIT, adds that Marxist state theory has been the predominant one in the study of nature of state. But in the recent past, as we just read, many new theoretical perspectives have started dealing in questions of legal and the state theory. Especially influential on the left have been Foucault's works as well as recent work in deconstruction in the field of discourse analysis. Other developments such as new institutionalism, rational choice and structuration theories have also offered alternatives to Marxist perspective. Challenge has also been mounted from the state-centered theorists themselves. Hoffman, OP.CIT, observes that the theories of the state are partial and defensible. A theory of capitalist state would be adequate to the extent that the theory is based on the specific characteristics of capitalist social formations. The state is not viewed, functionally, as automatically developing its form or changing its policy in response to the needs of the capitalist system. Mohit Bhattacharya, 1999, OP.CIT, avers that the theorists of the state have never been unanimous about the state's functions and behavior in actual practice. He observes that the assumption of an autonomous state and a benign elite as a champion of modernization and development has never been examined. The statist perspective to development has been responsible for it. If the nature of the state itself is in most instances the root of poverty, inequality, and injustice in the third world, then this needs to be seriously examined and exposed. Nira Chandoke, OP.CIT, adds that a meaningful state theory needs to negotiate not only the kind of state that exists but also the kind of state that should exist. One of the most severe deficiencies of existing theories of the state, observes David Held, OP.CIT, is their tendency to concentrate on group bargaining within a nation, state, pluralism, or on the citizens and their relation to the state, liberal democracy, or between classes, economy and state in capitalist country, Marxism. It is important to relate the state to the context of international conditions and pressures. Mohit Bhattacharya, 1999, OP.CIT, feels that Peter Self's modern theories of government, in which he weaves the pluralist, corporatist, and bureaucratic perspectives at one place, is a fresh insight into the changing integrative role of the state. Thus, the perspectives on the state either keep it at the periphery or totally bring it at the heart of political and socio-economic system. At times, optional areas of interference are granted to the state, but mostly it is best kept out of the way, even wished away or hoped that it would wither away. The state is the predator, necessary evil, provider of goods and services, facilitator, catalyst, and so on. The contemporary neoliberal perspective has earmarked a minimal role for the state, but this viewpoint holds little value for the developing countries. In the context of the Third World, where majority of the population is poor, deprived and disadvantaged, the state cannot be rolled back as it is needed for the functions of defense, security, welfare, infrastructure development, social justice and economic growth. Empirical evidence, as we will see later in this unit as well as the subsequent units of this course, calls for a renewed emphasis on bringing the state back in the globalization scenario. Before going into the role of the state in the globalization era, we must ascertain why and how can the state be brought back in. 1.4 Bringing the state back in, the contemporary debate. In order to understand if the state could be brought back in, we must recapitulate the evolution of the state under three major paradigms that could be categorized as Mark I, Mark II and Mark III. Bhattacharya, 1999, OP.CIT. The Mach I paradigm is the low state paradigm which ruled the roost between the 1860s 1930s under the liberal perspective. Right from the Industrial Revolution onwards, laissez-faire state was adopted and this state put till the 1930s. Even the Marxist viewpoint talked of low state approach, although for different reasons. I.e., state would form an interim law and order support system till the dictatorship of the proletariat precipitates its withering away. The Mark II paradigm or the high state paradigm has been prominent between 1930s and 1970s. It got a boost with the Keynesian macroeconomics. State was considered most suitable to perform the core and basic functions, leaving out the peripheral ones for the private sector. Economic recession followed by World War II brought the attention back to the state. But this paradigm was replaced by the Mark III paradigm, again a low state paradigm under the impact of the neoliberal perspective. With the fall of statism in East European countries, this new viewpoint got a fresh impetus. Thatcherism and Reaganism type of governance pushed the state into the very basic functional role of security, law, behavioralism. The behavioralist movement tried to organize research in political science on model of natural sciences. It emphasized on a science of politics, giving a new orientation to research and theory building exercises within the discipline. Behavioralism rejected political theory as merely chronological and intellectual history of ideas. It was believed to have no practical relevance in understanding political reality. Behavioralists used inductivist approach to research and remained prominent till the 1960s. The behavioralists' tendency to measure that could be easily measured rather than what was theoretically important was rejected by the post-behavioralists in the 1970s. Subrata Mukherjee and Sushila Ramaswamy, 1999, History of Political Thought, Plato to Marx, Prentice Hall, New Delhi. Bete Noya, person or thing one particularly dislikes, corporatism. It can be defined as a system of interest representation in which the constituent units are organized into a limited number of singular, compulsory, non-competitive, hierarchically ordered and functionally differentiated categories, recognized or licensed, if not created, by the state, and granted a deliberate representational monopoly within their respective categories in exchange for observing certain controls on their selection of leaders and articulation of demands and supports. Nicholas Lowe, 1991, Planning, Politics and the State, Political Foundations of Planning Thought, Unwin Himan, London, Dependency Theory, a theory that argues that, due to the exploitative nature of the relationship between advanced capitalist societies and the Third World, the development of the former resulted in the underdevelopment of the latter. Developing countries are kept in a position of dependency and underdevelopment due to existing economic and institutional power structures sustained by leading Western nations. www.indiana.edu/ip/glossary www.style.coventry.ac.uk/cbas. Discourse analysis allows affirmation of, and may, when properly theorized, induce improvements in tendencies already existing in public administration. The discourse theory in public administration urges movement away from the idea that there is a reality out there that a value-free researcher can account for by formulating law-like generalizations whose truth is observable, testable, and cumulative. The theoretical underpinnings of discourse analysis include phenomenology, contextual meaning, depends on experiences or interrelated condition. 2. Constructivism, observers of social reality cannot be external to it. 3. Structuration theory, basic domain of study of social sciences is neither the experience of the individual actor nor the existence of any form of societal totality but special practices ordered across space and time. And 4. Energy fields, institutions are recursive practices embedded in habitual human compartments and expectations of varying degree of malleability. Charles J. Fox and Hugh T. Miller, 1995, Postmodern Public Administration, Toward Discourse, Sage, London, End of Ideology. The thinking prevailing in the Western democracies that democracy has solved all the major problems of industrial society and that those which remain are of a second order magnitude or less serious in nature, involving merely technical adjustments within the prevailing democratic system, ectopic state, a society composed of infinite number of unorganized individuals that a hypertrophied state is forced to oppress and contain. It constitutes, as Durkheim puts it, a veritable sociological monstrosity. End of History, The End of History and the Last Man is a 1992 book by Francis Fukuyama, expanding on his 1989 essay The End of History. He argues the controversial thesis that the end of the Cold War signals the end of the progression of human history. Wikipedia.org.wiki, etatism, often considered as state socialism. It involves state control of some industries and public services. Countrystudies.us/Turkey/94.htm loop model of democracy. It comprises the following features. I. The people are aware of what they want or need. 2. Competing candidates or parties for electoral office offer alternative packages of wants or needs. 3. People choose a representative by voting which alternative package seems to best match their preferences. 4. Coalitions of winning entrepreneurs pass laws reflecting the people's choice. We, a vigilant populace, pays enough attention to the electoral process and the results. 6. If satisfied with results, people will reward incumbents with their votes. If not, they will vote for alternative packages. Charles J. Fox and Hugh T. Miller, 1995, op.cit, Methodological Individualism. It is one of the basic assumptions underlying public choice approach. It says that a rational man maximizes his utilities by I. Making decisions on the basis of self-interest. 2. Ranking rationally and methodically all available alternatives. 3. Collecting relevant information for minimizing risk and uncertainty. 4. Selecting a maximizing strategy in order to maximize benefits and we, remaining within the units of lawful conduct. Mohit Bhattacharya, 1999, 2nd edition, Restructuring Public Administration, Essays in Rehabilitation, Jawahar, New Delhi. Nihilism. Nihilism literally means belief in nothing. As a philosophical position, nihilism is the view that the world and especially human existence is without meaning, purpose, comprehensible truth, or essential value. It is more often a charge leveled against a particular idea than a position which is overtly subscribed to. Movements such as deconstructivism have been described by various observers as nihilist. Nihilism diffuses revolutionary movement of the mid-19th century Russia that showed contempt towards authority and tradition and believed in reason, materialism and radical change in society and government through terrorism and violence. www.thefreedictionary.com, New Right Philosophy. The proponents of New Right philosophy believe that empirical analysis of the consequences of government actions clearly establishes that the market is more effective than the government in achieving social goals. 4 main schools of New Right are Chicago, Austrian, public choice and supply side, principal agent theory. It is concerned with behavioral studies of employer-contractor or employer-employee in a business management context. The central dilemma investigated by the principal agent theorists is how to get the employee or contractor, agent, to act in the best interests of the principal, the employer. Also called agency cost theory, the agency costs involved are a kind of transaction cost. Without these costs, it is not possible for principals to ensure that agents will act in the principal's interest. Statism. Statist approaches present the state as an autonomous entity whose actions are not reducible to or determined by forces in society. It was recognized that though the state was disproportionately influenced by economic factors, it occupied a distinct and an irreducible place in society. A whole new vocabulary was coined for the state and its functionaries to describe their overwhelming power and autonomy from capitalist and working classes. The statists constructed a case for state-centric theory on the basis of a sustained attack on pluralist, structuralist, functionalist and Marxist accounts of the state. Nira Chandoke, 1995, State and Civil Society, Explorations in Political Theory, Sage, New Delhi. Rule of law. It implies that government authority may only be exercised in accordance with written laws which are adopted through an established procedure. As per Dicey's rule of law, no human being, rich or poor, influential or commoner, is above the law. All humans are equal before the law. n.wikipedia.org/wiki/rule-of-law transactional cost analysis. It is a mode of analysis which emphasizes the costs associated with carrying out transactions and exchanges in the economic or political sphere. Such costs can lead to suboptimal outcomes. This type of analysis studies institutional arrangements in society that raise or lower transaction costs. Washington Consensus. The term was coined in 1989 by John Williamson to refer to the lowest common denominator of policy advice being addressed by the Washington-based institutions to Latin American countries. It called for a competitive exchange rate, which necessarily implies intermediate regimes since either fixed or floating rates can easily become overvalued. The term was misconstrued as reforms being imposed by Washington-based institutions, though all that it aimed was to introduce one-size-fits-all type of magic pill. The term has become synonymous with neoliberalism and globalization. It stresses on corporate governance, anti-corruption devices, flexible labor markets, trade agreements, financial codes, etc. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video with next chapter.